Hello everybody, you know who it is by now. Comes up across the bottom, it's on my shirt. Now, bit of an unusual one this is. Wait for the motorbike to move away. This is a bit of an unusual one. I've got a garage floor to do. It's on a new build estate. Got a new build garage with a brand spanking new floor that's had plenty of time to dry. If anybody's saying, oh, you've got to wait for stuff to dry, it's had over 6 months to dry, so we're good to go. But a bit of an unusual one. I've not been sponsored. I've got no promotion of any product, but I have been sent by, you saw the thumbnail, FloorSaver. Scott at FloorSaver reached out to me and said, Phil, would you like to try any of our floor paints that we've got? And I said, yes, please, because I had a job coming up, which is this, that was pending, and it just felt timely. It's just felt timely that FloorSaver's reached out to me and said, Phil, would you like anything to try? So I said, yes, please. Now, I've said before, if Porsche are listening, I'm more than welcome to try Porsche out for a weekend if anybody wants to sponsor me with a Porsche, but it's not happened yet. We've been going since January 2021 and Porsche haven't been in touch yet. Never mind. But no, joking apart, we've got a garage floor to do. This is a concrete garage floor, and FloorSaver paints are geared up for garage floors that are actually concrete bases. What I'm going to be using is a 2Pac epoxy water-based floor paint, which will go on here a dream. I'm sure it will go on a dream. Now, I've got the proper system to do. I've got an etch primer. I've got the etch primer to get on, and once I've etch primed the floor, the concrete floor, I've got the floor paint to get the first coat on, which is the 2Pac epoxy water-based, and then tomorrow I will come back and give it a second coat and it'll be done. Now, it's quick drying because it's water-based and it is a 2Pac epoxy floor paint. But we want to just talk about the etch primer. Why use an etch primer? The alkali surface, the problems you've got is garage floors can be powdery, it can have crumbly cement on it, and if you put the etch primer on, that will neutralize that alkali surface. What it does, it goes onto the surface, and you will see me doing it. You put it on with a watering can, you see this go on, it starts to foam and bubble. That means it's working, and while it's doing its thing, you get a scrubbing brush and scrub over the surface. Once that's taken effect, you go over with some more water just to wash it all away. Now, you don't have to wait until the floor is actually dry before you get the 2Pac epoxy water-based floor paint on. It can still be damp, particularly because I'm using the 2Pac epoxy water-based paint. So what I'm going to be doing is getting this out. I'm going to get the watering can, which you can see down there. I'm going to water the garden, because you know all decorators are gardeners as well. I'm going to water the garden, do its thing. Once it's worked and it's foamed and it's frothed and it's bubbled, you know it's working, you can scrub it off. If it doesn't do that, there might be a reason for it, and the reason might be that it isn't a floor suitable for actually putting 2Pac epoxy floor paint on, because it might have already been sealed. It might have been a floor that won't be porous enough to actually take the paint. So without further Hugh Pew, Bonham, Grew, Cuthbert, Dibble and Grub, I will be getting this all set up and I will come back to you and I'll show you what I'm doing. Now, the 2Pac epoxy is in 2 tins, and I will explain about the mixing of that once we're ready for actually doing it. Right, we're all about ready to go. You can see I've got the FloorSaver etch primer there. It's a primer, it prepares bare concrete for painting, you can just see that. I have my £8, albeit a few pence, watering can from Screwfix, and you need a rose on the end because this will evenly distribute the etch primer over the floor surface, which you can see there. If you don't use it with a rose on the end, and this is what a rose is, you know, it's got, I'll turn that around. It's got the little holes across it. You could put too much of the solution all in one spot and it would actually, let's just say, burn the floor area more so than you need it to do. So what we're going to do is going to spread it out nice and evenly using that rose. One of the things I will mention is if it isn't foaming on your bare concrete,
just take a step back, wash it all off and have another go at it. What you might find you need to do is get some light sandpaper just to key the surface, because the actual concrete might be too shiny, if that makes sense, and it's making it very difficult for the etch primer to actually get into the surface, i.e., as I said earlier, you need a porous surface for it actually to soak into. But the whole reason you're using this etch primer, it's to actually get that dirty, dusty surface cleaned down, ready for actually putting the paint on, because the last thing you want to do is actually start painting and going around the edges and rolling it all out, and you're actually painting over loose, flaky concrete, because adhesion is the main key, and this will help with the adhesion, and that's why we're using it. If anybody wants to know, there's a shelf life of this of 12 months. Clearly, I've had this delivered in the last couple of days and I'm using it straight away. So if there is anything left, you can actually tip it back in there, and you might have a job coming up in the future that you might need to use it again. But just bear in mind that you've got a 12-month period to actually get it used by. It might be an idea to even write with a marker pen on the top the date that you received it and the date you've used it, so you've got an idea of how long you've actually had it in your workshop. Right, we're going for it now. I've got a sweeping brush there ready. I will be doing the filming while I'm doing it. I'm going to carefully, with the watering can, get it over the surface. And I will come back to this and scrub it in before it's dry. Now, one of the key things is, when you're actually doing this, once you're neutralising it with the water at the end, do it before the acid, i.e. the etch primer's actually had time to dry off. The other thing to say is I have old trainers on. Because I don't want to get it everywhere. There is quite a smell with it. Now this garage is 6x3 and a 5 litre canister of the etch primer is ample on this. It's foaming and doing its thing. Don't be frightened thinking that there's going to be an acid etch primer going everywhere, because once it's done the foaming and it's reacted with the alkali in the surface, it's good to go and it's neutralised itself. What's the last little bits now? Just remember not to walk through the new build house carpets with shoes that are impregnated with this etch primer. We have covered all that surface. I've got a little bit left just in case. But I'm going to just get the sweeping brush going before I turn off the camera. So bear with me while I do this, moving it all around, and I'll come back to you when I'm rinsing it all off.
Hockey docky, as Manuel would say. Now, you can see the colour of the floor, it's wet. I've got that etch primer all over it. I've gone over it with the sweeping brush, as you've seen. I've got a blower just blowing to circulate the air, because there is a little bit of a whiff of that, the acid attack, and I just want to circulate the air around. Now, before this is dry, what you've got to do is go over with your water, which will just clean and neutralise the rest of that garage floor. So actually going over it with water will, let's call it, kill anything that's on that surface. So I'm going to do that now, get it all wet in, sweep it back out. I'll have another bucket of water as well, rinse it all off, and then I'll let the fan do its work, dry it off slightly, then we'll start mixing some of the 2Pac epoxy water-based paint for the floor. You just saw me fast forward through that. I've got it all wet. I'm going to get the sweeping brush on it and start sweeping it to the front now, get it all out, then I'll go back over it again. You know, there's some days I wish I had done a bit better at school, that I was using my brain and not my hands, because I feel shattered doing that. That is the first wash coat going on. I'm going to give it a second now. You can see that the etch primer's worked. There's no more fizzing from when the etch primer went on, and it's actually bringing a lot of dirt and sediment that's on that surface. Now, the customer's been really good because he did go over, swept the floor, vac the floor before I arrived, and any spots of paint that he'd got on, he'd actually got them off as well. So it's actually made my job quite a lot easier to go over this to make sure that the floor is ready and prepped for painting. It's always nice to have an apprentice, i.e. the customer, who says, Phil, I can see you sweating like a PIG, because we've got 28 degrees in the UK at the minute, unbelievably, and a new build house as well insulated. That's no exception when it comes to actually the garages as well. So I'm letting Matt just do the final flush through of the water over the garage floor there. I've given it 4 soaks with clean water and we're about there. So what I'm going to do, we've got a DeWalt fan blower just there, just circulate that air, because I said the pungent smell of that etch primer was just making me feel a bit off with the fairies. Not quite, it's not as bad as that. But that will circulate the air and we'll get a little bit of a draft through, which will help it dry. I expect probably be about half an hour, we will see this floor drying off, and then we can start getting some paint on it. So all good, it's all good. While the Sorcerer's Apprentice is just finishing off sweeping out the garage, let's just talk about this epoxy floor resin and the epoxy floor paint. Now, this is your curing agent. It's 2Pac, so you mix that with that, or that with that, you know what I mean. Now, what I would say is give that a stir before you add that to it, because you don't know what's settled, what's on the side. You can use a mechanical, you know, the whisks that you put on a drill, but just be mindful that you're not actually agitating it too much and putting a load of air into it and bubbles. So I'm going to do it with a mechanical mixing stick, and I'm going to be doing a light mix with that first, making sure there's none on the side, giving that a little bit of a stir and adding that to that. Now, once that's mixed together, it's activated and you've got a window time of 2 hours. Now, what I'm going to say to you is also bear in mind your conditions, because if your temperatures are dropping and it's getting cold and wet, don't use it. It does say that you've got, you're looking around about 15 degrees, no less than 15 degrees. And recoat time, I'm going to say 12 hours, so next day. And again, your temperatures, you want to be between about 15 and 20 degrees. If you are leaving it a bit longer than 12 hours, i.e. next day, for actually coating up this on your garage floor, it does say do it within 5 days. Now, clearly, you won't mix this up and wait 5 days to do your second coat. You mix this up and use it once you've mixed it. So that's just a word of warning. Instructions, always read the instructions. I'm always one that says always read the back of the can. Now, you walk on time, because this is 2Pac epoxy. It is a solid, hard, walkable surface to walk on, and within 16 to 24 hours you should be all right to walk on it. Now, car traffic. Cars are the main thing that is the decorator stroke floor painter's nightmare, because there's things in tyres that actually eat into oil-based floor paints. Now, hence why we're using epoxy floor paint. You're needing to leave this to dry and cure for that floor there, you can see, 2 to 3 days. And again, temperature wise,
15 to 20 degrees 15 to 20 degrees is ideal. Now your full hardness and your scratch and chemical resistance of this, you're looking 7 days plus. So if I say to you, you can walk on this after 16 to 24 hours, i.e. 2 days. You can put your car on it from 2 to 3 days, but your full curing time for this, 7 days. That's giving you, that would give you the best optimum time if you wanted to do scratch tests and things like that. Not that you will be, but at the moment we have got that floor all washed. It is now drying. It doesn't matter if it's still a little bit wet. I will let it dry a little bit more than that, but then we can get the first coat on, and I will come back next day, i.e. after 12 hours, to get the second coat on. Right, you're going to ask me, what do I use to apply this? Now, I've got a roller scuttle. Now, this is a metal roller scuttle, i.e. roller bucket. We use this when we're doing floor painting. What's been in it before has been a 2-pack for, I can't even get the words out. What's been in it before has been a 2-pack floor paint, and it is solid. So I've got no problems with adding more floor paint into there. It's, I don't know, let's call it old school. This is an old school scuttle. Now, roller sleeve. I've got an old roller sleeve. It's a medium pile. I've got two. You can see probably one just there. I've got two exactly the same. They've been used before with emulsions. These are now redundant to me, as in actually using it for decorating jobs, and we just save these for when we've got stuff like this to do, where we want to throw a roller away, particularly when we've done floor paint. So that is just a medium pile roller. I can't remember what brand it was, it doesn't matter, but we're going over a smooth surface. That will be ideal. Now, as I say, that will be thrown away after I've used it, because you can't save it for the next day, because it will be setting up and going solid. Right, brush wise, I've got a 4-inch brush. Again, it's one of our old ones that are just in a drawer that we don't use for general decorating now. We use them when we come to doing jobs that it's a brush that needs to be thrown away. So that's just a general 4-inch emulsion brush. If you're feeling more comfortable using something a bit smaller, some people can't handle a big one like that, you might want to just drop down to a 2-inch and cut in quite neatly with a 2-inch. But I'm a skilled painter and decorator. I is a professional, and I will have no problem handling a whopper like that. So there we have it. We've actually just spoke about the paints. Now, FloorSaver do these paints. I've just got the information sheet for you. I don't know whether you can see it. I will read it. FloorSaver do these epoxy floor paints, and they do an anti-slip if you need anti-slip properties as well. Colours wise, we've got a light grey. So they do a light grey, a mid grey, they do a mid blue, they do a tile red, and they do a mid green. Now, the other thing I will say to you, if you've got a garage floor that's got cracks in it and it needs repairing, I would say please speak to FloorSaver to give you some advice on what is the best products to use to actually repair those cracks. I've not got a floor that's got any problems. So I don't need to do any crack repairs on that. I will be going straight over with the FloorSaver epoxy floor paint. Right, so just a couple of things, or one thing I'll mention. This, I said earlier, it's a 6x3 garage. Now, the 5-litre combination of the hardener and the actual paint is enough to cover this area. Now, on the spec sheet, it says 5 litre covers up to 30 square metres, or metres squared, however you want to do it. It's the M with the little 2. So 30 metres square per coat, and if you were looking at a 2.5 litre canister tin, you would be looking at half of that. Now, I would say 1 coat 1 day, whatever's left over, tip it back into the tin and just forget about it. Don't try and save it for another day, because it won't be usable for the next day. You will be using 1 tin per coat, and that's the best way to do it. Right, we're still here. We are just waiting for it to dry off. If you can see, we've got the white patches coming there, which is a good sign that it's actually drying off on us. I said earlier, you can actually go over this surface if it is slightly damp with that 2Pac epoxy water-based paint, but I want to leave it a little bit longer. I don't want it still, you can see, looking quite dark. That etch primer has worked if you see your cement-based floor looking a little bit whiter than it was previously, which you can see it is there if I stand to the side. So all in all, we're doing well. We'll just give it another 20 minutes, then we'll start getting the paint out. Right, I'm just about to start, and I've got the 2Pac, I've got the paint out there. This is the curing agent, which is the colour of light grey. You can see that. Hope you can see it. I've mixed it up because there was a little bit of heavier pigment, whatever it was, stuck on the base. That's why you mix it up. You can just see a little bit on there. So mix it nicely, make sure there's nothing on the sides. Then you can actually add the resin to it. Now, you're going to ask me about this floor paint. Just quickly reading off the spec sheet. It's an industrial grade, heavy duty floor paint. FloorSaver epoxy floor paint is water-based, 2-part epoxy resin for heavily used internal concrete floors. This is a concrete floor. We've got no disputing that. The tough mid-gloss finish dust-proofs and protects concrete and makes cleaning much easier. It can be applied to bare concrete or existing well-bonded paint. Now, if it's existing well-bonded paint, I think you might have to check to make sure it is actually another 2Pac paint, because if you were going over something else, there might be a reaction. Again, please ask and ring up and speak to FloorSavers about that. There will be a link in the description below to the FloorSavers website. We recommend 2 coats. But if overcoating existing paint in a similar colour, 1 coat is generally all that is required. Clearly we've got a brand spanking new floor that we've etch primed, and it is now nearly all dry. Use it where ordinary single pack paint just won't stand up to the wear and tear, such as forklift trucks, forklift truck areas, or areas where vehicles are used and parked. Now this is an area that's got a car that's a show car. It doesn't go out very often. It's a Sunday driver's car, so we need something that's going to be standing up to the tyres that are actually sticking onto the, you know, staying in one place. Just finishing off, or use it where you want the paint that will last for a good few years without having to recoat. 2Pac water-based epoxies for heavy duty wear areas, warehouses, floor, workshops, showrooms, etc. Good general chemical resistance, brilliant, easy roll application, available in mid-gloss, which we've got. Choose epoxy floor paint, anti-slip for wet or slippery areas. We've not got that issue. And then 2.5 litres covers 15 square metres, and the 5 litre covers 30 square metres, and that's what I discussed earlier. So without holding us up any longer, I'm going to mix that in there, mix it all up, and I've got a 2-hour open working time. I'll cut in around the edges with a brush, and if you can just see, I have just ran a little bit of tape around the skirting to protect it, because I've got a feeling that the brush might have a sprag bristle that might catch the skirting board. So let's just be a bit better safe than sorry. Right, let's crack on. Can you see? Hopefully, I was mixing that as I stirred it in. I gave the epoxy resin a little bit of a shake, not that there's anything to settle in there. Now I'm going to stir this for a couple of minutes to make sure it's fully activated. I've got a brush there, I'm just going to wipe out the last bits of resin. The brush I'm using there is one of the, for the trade, Hamilton brushes, the cheapest chips, and they're ideal for jobs where you can just do a bit of painting and then throw it away. Don't mix it too fast. You don't want to spill it everywhere. You just want to get it
mixing nicely, and you can see how thin the paint is. This is going to brush and roll beautifully. Make sure you mix anything that might be stuck to the sides. Go down to the bottom, make sure you get everything off the bottom as well. Right, I'm going to tip this into the paint scuttle. I'll tip about half in, wipe that round, and I will work out of this paint tin. And you know what? I'm going to be a rebel and I'm going to use that brush to cut in. For the purpose of the video, I'm going to start in this corner and work my way around. Again, I will use that 2-inch brush. If it feels like I'm not putting enough on, I will drop to that 4-inch. You can hear me as I'm working. I can talk to you. Put plenty on, but don't get it pooling. And when I mean pooling, i.e. don't get it with pools of paint. Just making sure I get into the nooks and crannies around the actual garage door frame. Now, this floor is still a little bit wet, but mainly dry. And I did do a good sweep before I came to get this coat on. You know what, that brush has pants, I'm swapping to a big one. Get a bit more on the brush now, that's better. Having the tape around the edges is really good. You work quick with this. I've only got 2 hours to get it done before it starts setting up. Making sure it goes underneath the skirting. Now when you come to do a second coat on this tomorrow, it will be a lot easier to coat up because you've already got a coat on the surface. Roll the pole out of the way. Little indentations in the concrete, just make sure you've got enough paint going in there. And I am pushing paint underneath that skirting edge. Right, I think you get the idea. Let me crack on, we'll fast forward and you will see it with one coat on finished. I've cut it all in. I'm going to get the roller and I'm going to start rolling from the top to the front, because what you don't want to do is trap yourself into a corner that you can't get out. Now I have to say, this is a water-based 2-pack. There definitely is no smell with this.
Just bedding the roller into the paint. There might be a bit of squeaking, but we're going to fast forward through all that. There might be some people that have got the 18-inch rollers. You will do this floor twice as quick as me with the 9-inch. But the beauty with the 9-inch is, with it being a single arm sleeve roller, I can get really close up to the skirting to give a next to no brush mark effect for cutting in. You might find there's a little few air bubbles when the concrete was poured. They're only small, but what I would say is make sure your roller with your paint is flooding those in. Right, that is all first coated. And I have to say how impressed I am that there's no smell. Even the customers come out, you've probably seen him on the fast forwarded bits of the video. He says there's no smell from that, and I went, it's water based. It's a 2-pack water based epoxy. And you know what, I'm dead impressed. That now, I'm coming back tomorrow, just over 12 hours, and we will be getting a second coat on it. Well, I will be getting a second coat on it. The excess floor paint that I've actually got in the roller scuttle and in the tin, I'm just going to tip back into the tin, and it's binned. We're not doing anything with it. We have now finished with it. So, can you see me? I've gone dark. We're finished with it. So what we'll be doing is just putting that in the bin, getting rid of it. I will see you tomorrow, bright and early, and let's get a second coat on. Second coat will go on a lot easier because we're not going onto that porous surface, even though it's been etch primed, and the porosity of that surface is even, well, it's been taken out even more now we've actually got that floor paint on. So we'll probably be using even less paint than we used today. But see you in the morning. Welcome back everybody. It's the next day and really pleased how this floor's dried. It's walkable. I can actually walk on it to get another coat on. It feels a little bit, if you put your hand on it and the warmth of your hand, it feels a little bit soft, but don't think, i.e. soft, it's not set up and starting to cure. It does feel quite solid. I don't want to do a coin test on it because clearly it's only been done, well, 13, 14 hours. But just interestingly, as I finished yesterday, I tipped any remaining floor paint back into the tin. Well, what else can you do with it? And you know, it's solid as a rock in there. If you can see that, solid as a rock. It's not going anywhere. So that has cured and set up. I won't say the word cured. I'll say the word set up in the tin with the lid on overnight. So how good's that? Proper 2-pack. Right, I'm going to crack on. I'm going to do exactly the same again. I'm going to mix that, which is the resin, into the, oh that's heavy, into the main tin of the curing agent. And as I said yesterday, make sure you give that a stir before you add the smaller tin to it. Now, clearly, I'm not needing 5 litres, so just bear in mind and do your measurements, because I think I could have probably done 2 lots of 2.5s. But you know what it's like, if you've not got enough, it's always the worst case scenario that you're always going to run out, so always allow for it. Right, so the question on everybody's lips, how much is it? You're within a few pounds, you're looking at, with VAT, you're looking around about £70 for the 2 tins. That's the hardener and the resin. Now, if you want it with a non-slip aggregate, it's a little bit more money. And I do say to you, please contact FloorSaver and they will give you the advice that you need. I'm just showing you how to do it. But yeah, FloorSaver is the people to speak to if you've got any questions. So let's crack on with it. And I think 20-25 minutes we'll have all this coated up. It's going to be a nice day again in the UK, so I would say to the customer, leave the door open as long as you possibly can, and it'll be drying off nicely without any temperature drop. We'll probably be easily around that 20 degrees today, which will be just really ideal for it. So catch you in a bit. Right, we'll just keep this quick. Can you see it? All the resins and all the bits and pieces have settled. I can feel the solid at the bottom of the tin. This is now the second tin that I'm mixing up for the second coat. I'm going to give this a couple of minutes of a stir with my mixing stick. I will then add the resin into it, and then we will get this bad boy second coated. So I will get this done and speak to you at the end. We're all tipped out. I'm still working out the actual paint tin. I've got another 4-inch, which is very, well, I think it's the same brand as what I used yesterday, and I have still got the same sort of medium power roller, which was fine. You don't want to put too much on, but you don't want to be struggling with a too short a power, so that's just a medium power roller. I'm going to do the usual cutting and then roll, and then I think really I'll show you at the end what it actually looks like. I'm just going to say, now we're on the second coat, it cut in really well. You'll use less paint on the second coat because the opacity of the surface is greatly reduced because you've got that first coat of paint on. And don't forget, with us using that etch primer, that has also cleaned that floor and give it a good base for that first coat to go on. So now we're coming on with the second coat. I'm not over rolling it out. I'm putting plenty on because I know I've got plenty of paint. And I'm just making sure that I've got a lovely, nice, even coat back over that surface that I did yesterday. As I say, I'm not over rolling it. I'm making sure I've got plenty on that roller so it gives a nice, even coat with plenty on it. Now, if you do get it pooling up, i.e. there might be little craters in the surface of the concrete where more of the paint will sit into it, don't worry about that because clearly the 2-pac will react, and the chemical reaction between the two, it does set up. You can see how it was in the tin. Even with the lid on, it still set up and went to a solid block of paint. As I say, I'm putting plenty on, rolling it out nicely without over rolling it. You'll know what I mean when you actually apply this second coat. You can get a nice coat on and you don't feel you're having to make the paint go a long way. I'm on about the floor paint. And I think you can see, using an extendable roller pole makes it a lot easier. I'm cutting nicely into the actual skirting, very close, because of that end I can get really close to the skirting. So where you've cut in, you can then, let's call it, you can get your roller orange peel going as close as you possibly can to what you've cut in. So let's get this all finished and I'll see you at the end. Well, there we have it, everybody. That's the second coat gone on, and I'll say what a dream the second coat goes on, because I was saying when we were actually rolling it out, that first coat has taken the porosity out of that surface, and the second coat is actually just sitting nicely on that, and it glides, the actual paint glides over it. Now, I was explaining to you that when we're doing it, we're putting enough paint on without it being overloaded, but we're rolling it out enough that you don't get, you know, when you get marks at the end of your roller to give like tram lines or anything like that. We're not doing that. We are rolling it out nicely, but we're putting enough on. And I have to say, if you remember, well, minutes ago when you were watching it and I was doing the first coat, there's slight air bubbles in that concrete that are just little craters. Now, as I was explaining yesterday, the idea is to try and get your paint, your floor paint into those. Some of them still popped, the paint popped in those little air bubbles, and you could just see the little holes there. Now, day two, let's call it day two, we've got that second coat on, they have nearly filled. So where you thought to yourself, oh, I've got some little holes to fill up with the paint, they've actually flooded in with the paint and it's actually now nicely levelled out. So all in all, really pleased with that. I have to say, very impressed with the FloorSaver paint. I'm going to say thanks to Scott for reaching out to me to actually try it and give it a go. It was very timely because I knew I'd got this garage floor coming up, and what a pleasure it's been to actually use. Now, I'm always going to say to you, and as I've said earlier, always read the instructions. If in doubt, ask those that know, because if you're unsure about your floor surface, give them a call. Contact them off their live chat on days that they're actually there, Monday to Friday, and probably 9 o'clock till 5, or even just send them an email, just explain what your surface is, because there are surfaces that this paint isn't suitable for, like your floated screeds, your polished floors that are probably not porous enough to actually take even the etch primer. But if in doubt, ask. I've been very fortunate that this concrete floor took that etch primer really nicely. If it didn't, and if it didn't bubble and fizz, what you would do is you'd wash it all off and I would do it again. Now, they call it a coin test or a scratch test. You can always just get an end of a screwdriver and just scratch that surface to see whether that etch primer has actually worked on that concrete. Now, if it was all crumbling, still coming away on the surface, and you would probably know whether your concrete's a little bit crumbly, it's always best to give it another etch to try and make sure it's binding, because that etch primer has made the world of difference. It has cleaned that floor, it has taken all that loose sediment, the dust, the dirt, anything that might be there that would hinder the application and probably even stop the application going onto that floor surface when you come to do the floor paint. It has actually helped that and aided the application. So, as I say, always read the instructions, and if in doubt, ask. But so far, so good. All I've got to do now is tip out that paint back into the tin, because I won't be using it again. And if you have read the instructions, there is a bit of a chance that you could wash out your equipment, i.e. your roller and the brush that you've applied the floor paint by, because it is water-based. But if it's starting to go off, if it's starting to set up, you will probably struggle to do it. I used, you know, the little 2-inch brush that I used yesterday to wipe out the tin. I did get that washed out. I put it through some lukewarm water and a bit of fairy liquid, or other washing up liquids are available, and it did actually come back. I'll get it here. Can you see me? It's there. It is still usable for another day. I will probably give that another wash out, and also bit of methylated spirit brush cleaner might help that, but it has actually brought it back to life. So just to sum up, very impressed with this paint. Thank you very much to everybody that's watched this video, and I hope it's helped you if you're in doubt about doing your own garage floor. So any questions, just ask. And I'm just going to say to everybody, if you're liking this content, please give us a thumbs up, give us a like, give us a subscribe. And if you're really, really liking it, there is also the super thanks and buy me a coffee. So see you on the next one. Please watch the videos at the end.